Hello and welcome to the last collective conspiracy show of the year. And what a year it's been. Fantastic year if you enjoy being locked up and having your rights taken away from you on a daily basis. I'm sure you've really enjoyed this year. If not, a bit like myself and Mark, then it's probably been a bit of a shitty year. So we're here to discuss that. We're here to discuss how the year's going to end, the latest COVID restrictions, the latest tiers, the latest rubbish, really, that's being spouted by the government officials. I'm glad Mark decided to come on today because we're going to talk about a little bit about the relationship, the abusive relationship that is appearing here, and the parallels between a almost like a domestic abusive relationship and one that we're currently in between the government and the public. And it's a thing called gaslighting, really, and that's a term that I wasn't that familiar with until lately, and it seems to be bandied around everywhere. I'm sure it'll be added into the dictionary if it's not already. But yeah, so thanks for coming on, Mark. We've got Andrew due on, I believe. He'll no doubt be on soon. But yeah, we'll just crack on. So thank you to the guys joining in now, and if you join in later when it's not live, thank you anyway for popping on. You notice there's a new change to the show. We have this little banner running across the bottom showing who sponsors the show, and we have a nice little badge up in the top corner, the nice little logo of the show. So we are trying to improve things here. And many thanks to Kieran as well for helping with this from Keep On Chatting. So let me just turn the comments on. I always like to see the comments. So hi, Alex. If you are going to talk, either give StreamYard your permission so I can see who you are, or just add your name at the end just in case I want to kind of mention your comment, guys. Thanks for that. So, Mark, let's crack on. So this kind of abusive relationship. Now, I'm going to share my screen. First time I've done this, so hopefully this works. Yep. Hopefully everyone can see this. Is that just a black screen?
Yes.
That didn't go well then. Right, let me see if I can try again. So let's go. Stop screen. What does that do? Cracking. Share screen. Here we go. So Mark was kind enough to send me a document that he has taken from Psychology Today. And it's a blog that talks about gaslighting, and it's the origin of the word gaslighting and how it works, really. So if I can just application window, I'm not sure, it's not letting me. Well, that's a shame. Right, but anyway, so Mark, do you want to just give us a bit of history on gaslighting, and then I'll try and get this up in the meantime while you're just talking about that.
Yeah, well, the actual term gaslighting is actually derived from the film, 1944 film actually called Gaslight, where a husband tries to convince his wife that she's insane by causing her to question her own reality, essentially. And that's where the term gaslighting comes from. And in gaslighting, it's very much become prevalent in power and control in relationships.
Yeah.
So forms of abuse. So that's an area which is similar to what's in that document I sent you, which is on Psychology Today, by the way. And it goes through 7 stages of gaslighting and how you can recognise it in a relationship. And essentially that's also similar to what they used many years ago that was developed called the Duluth wheel, which is about power and control. So there's a lot of parallels between that as well.
Okay.
And they would use this type of model in domestic abuse.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Originally, it was mainly men, focused on men, but obviously as the modern age, it's become more what they call gender neutral. So it's not just about
there we go.
control of men. So if you were to download a copy of the Duluth wheel from a while ago, it use the word, men in it, man would use this type of behaviour. But obviously that in today's situation where we are, they've made that sort of, no gender to it really.
Yeah, because I mean, it's without going slightly off topic. It is there was a slight sexism towards it always being the man that is abusive in a relationship, and it's not always the case. The man can be on the receiving end. Do you want me to? I've got the screen up finally, Mark. It's finally being shared. So we'll just go through these points as you've pointed out there. They are listed 1 to 7. So we'll just go through them. We'll just talk a bit about them as we go. So point 1 was lie and exaggerate. So the gaslighter creates a negative narrative about the gaslightee. For example, there's something wrong and inadequate about you, based on generalized false presumptions and accusations rather than objective, independently verifiable facts, thereby putting the gaslightee on the defensive. So let's break that down. So we're talking there about we're being told there's something wrong with you or inadequate. So you're ill, you've got a virus, you could kill a granny, you could kill your family.
Yeah. And essentially, just to put that in a bit of a broad terms, what we're sort of discussing, just to put this in place, I began to notice, like a lot of other people, and compare the government's behaviour towards the people, because we have a relationship with government and people government.
Yep.
So when this started to emerge, some of these traits that we're going to talk about now, it become quite clear that it does cross over into, large population of our country and the government.
Yep.
I just want to make that clear. And as we go through this will become evident.
Yeah. That's what I thought when I read it. That it was easy. It was easy to translate from not just a man and a woman in a relationship. It was easy to transpose that across to 67 million and 300 and whatever in Parliament. So point 2, repetition. Like psychological warfare, the falsehoods are repeated constantly in order to stay on the offensive, control the conversation, and dominate the relationship. So we see this every day: repetition, hands, face, space, constant, sloganism, constant bombardment by the media telling us what the next scariest thing on the horizon, government telling us what we can and can't do. It's the same every single day, and it becomes so repetitive that that's how you can begin to predict the programming. What's coming next almost, because you it's just like a script. You know what's going to happen next.
Yes, and I think that's important. The repetition is because that is what I or you could walk outside, or anybody else, and we don't. If you had no television or media, you would not know perhaps that we're in a pandemic.
Yeah.
Or an alleged deadly virus.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
So this repetition through the media almost makes you begin to doubt your reality.
Yes. Yes.
So that's where that is important. It's done through the media, and that is where the doubt can set in on your reality of what you are seeing. I mean, let's just start with the original lockdown.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people wore masks.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
It was hard to distinguish that there was a pandemic apart from what we were being told through the radio, news media, and television. So that's where the repetition starts of really breaking down your reality of what you're living in.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. So Andrew's here now. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, guys.
We're just going through that document that Mark sent earlier. I don't know if you had time to go through it, but we're just
I haven't had a chance.
So, we're just discussing the gaslighting and the stages of gaslighting. So, stage 1 was the lie and exaggerate. So, the fact that the government make us feel inadequate, they make us feel like we're a problem, we're doing something wrong, such as we're responsible for killing people with a virus. Point 2 was repetition, as Mark was just saying there. So psychological warfare. So it's hands, face, space, constantly being bombarded at us, things like that. And Now we're on to point 3. So escalate when challenged. So when called on the liars, the gaslighter, or in this case the government, escalates the dispute by doubling and tripling down on their attacks, refuting substantive evidence with denial, blame, and more false claims or misdirection, sowing doubt and confusion. So again, what we get there is people will call them out. Of course they will. Which is exactly what we're doing now. We're calling them out. So what they do is they kind of forget the evidence. We're not going to look at the evidence. We're following the science. Nobody knows what the hell that is. And they almost double down that in terms of they make it worse. They push an agenda even more. Would you say, Mark?
Yeah.
I think if you just on just a practical thing, just zoom in on the document. So
I can. Right, that's great.
Yeah, if whoever's got the document home, just press click onto a word or something, then just control and mouse wheel forwards
on the actual document itself.
Yeah, and that should zoom in. Then you can zoom back. Just go back across. Just drag the bar left, and then we can read the text a bit better.
This is why we need you, Andrew. This is why we need you.
And then you can just that's it. You can just zoom out a little bit, and that's it. That's brilliant.
Is that better?
So yeah, it's loads better. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So we're on point 3, weren't we?
So point 3, yeah. So what you're looking at there is the doubling down, really ramping up the testing your reality. So what that can be akin to the introduction of the masks.
Yeah.
You're really now ramping up, even though a lot of people early on were calling out the figures, Andrew, and other people, and really challenging that evidence that we were being presented with. Then come June, I think it was when mandatory masks.
Yeah. And now we get this mutant strain. It's almost like people were beginning to question it. We were seeing, look, this is rubbish. We're seeing through it. So it's the next level now. So they've doubled down. Now they're tripling down, and it's the next.
Just on the masks, let's not forget that up until about the end of April, they were saying masks don't work. The government, that was coming out of the mouths of the government, wasn't just people like us. So it was they themselves, that were actually saying, oh well, we're not going to bother with these masks. And I think they were probably sort of saying similar things about the vaccination, saying, well, the vaccine's so many years away or whatever, so we can't really rely on that.
No.
I'm sure there were some of the government people were saying something along those lines. Oh, the vaccine's at least a year away. At the very least, maybe some of them were saying longer than that. Anyway, carry on.
Yep. And that point you just made will come back in a minute. It will actually be relevant to what you just made.
Yeah. On the point of masks, I do have a bit of, it's not a revelation or anything, but I have been told something that kind of shocked me a bit today, and I'll reveal all once we've discussed this document. But the masks and the whole PPE thing might make a bit more sense then. So we're on to point 4. So wear out the victim. So by staying on the offensive, the gaslighter, the government, eventually wears down their victim, us, who becomes discouraged, resigned, pessimistic, fearful, debilitated, and self-doubting. The victim begins to question her or his own perception, identity, and reality. Now, this is true. I mean, even us guys, as stoic as we are in our cause to fight this, we all have days where we think, I can't be arsed anymore. Should we just keep our mouth shut and have a quiet life? And how many people do that? I know loads of people that just stick a mask on because they don't want the stares. They don't want the tuts. They think it's rubbish, but they go along with it for a quiet life.
Yes,
absolutely.
And I think that's a really relevant one. That is about wearing the victim down. I think that obviously that's what's been going on as it prolongs.
Yeah. I mean, that's self-evident. The longer it goes, really, that we are going to get more and more worn down, and eventually you just grow to accept, almost like Stockholm syndrome. Really, you grow to accept. That it is what it is. Point 5, form codependent relationships. So the Oxford Dictionary defines codependency as excessive emotional or psychological reliance on a partner. In a gaslighting relationship, the gaslighter elicits constant insecurity and anxiety in the gaslightee, thereby pulling the gaslightee by the strings. The gaslighter has the power to grant acceptance, approval, respect, safety, and security. However, they also have the power, and often threaten to, take them away. Now, we've seen that before, haven't we? The codependent relationship is formed based on fear, vulnerability, and marginalisation. If we just lock down for 3 weeks, we can all have Christmas.
Yeah, marginalisation of people who are opposing.
That's right. That's right.
All the measures. Obviously, there you're setting up that codependence. That is really important because that completely takes away a person's autonomy to be self-governing. That's where the power and the control comes in.
Yeah.
That's exactly what the government's done systematically over the 9 months to the majority of the population.
That's right. And so many people just rely on the government, because they just can't be asked to think for themselves. Let the government tell me what I can and can't do, and it makes my life easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's that codependence. Andrew, do you have any thoughts on point 5 there?
Yeah, I mean, this is something I think is more at Mark's area of expertise, but I've been saying to several people how, this is all part of a situation where the governments of the world have formed a narcissistic, abusive relationship with the populations that they're, have power over. And the other thing I was going to add to that was about, the government thinking for them and stuff. Like we're all hooked into this system. Me too. I don't have any government benefits, but I use the banks and I use the post office or whatever. So if some government legislation comes down about the use of the post office, I'm not going to bloody drive down to bloody Kent to deliver a letter or something. I'm going to use the post office.
Yeah.
So just as an example. Or if we have to go to that, like my wife, she went in for an operation, a minor operation, and she had the COVID test. And she wasn't as bothered about that as I was. And as it turned out, she came out negative anyway. But, you get forced into that. And it's not like we could do this operation ourselves. Ideally, we'd be able to say, right, well, we'll do it ourselves at home, and sort ourselves out. But in this case, you can't do that. So, because we've now lived within this system for centuries, and it's become more and more elaborate and sophisticated, and we have that, so that codependency is very strong. Anyway, even if we just have a nice life and none of this shit going on, that codependency is going to be there. But now they've turned it on us, so they've used that codependency as a weapon, rather than it being a thing which is just, a mutually beneficial arrangement where they get money off us and we get services off them. They've added this extra thing now that, no, we're going to tell you exactly what you can and can't do.
Yeah, so that's right. And the thing is, people often, we don't mock, but we often look at countries that have this kind of relationship overtly, and that's countries like North Korea or Russia or China. They're overtly what the capitalists, the West, have called communist. But really, we're the same, but we do it covertly. At least those guys in Korea and whatever, at least they know that they're living in a dictatorship. We have, for as you say, Andrew, for centuries, in my opinion, but it's always done covertly, and if you can't see the prison bars, then you don't think you're in prison, you think you're free. Point 6, I mentioned about Stockholm syndrome, and that's kind of where this comes in here. So give false hope. As a manipulative tactic, the gaslighter will occasionally treat the victim with mildness, moderation, and even superficial kindness or remorse. Matt Hancock crying on TV, to give the gaslightee false hope. In these circumstances, the victim might think, no, he's not really that bad, or maybe things are going to get better, or let's just give it a chance. But beware, the temporary mildness is often a calculated maneuver intended to instill complacency and have the victim's guard down before the next act of gaslighting begins. With this tactic, the gaslighter also further reinforces the codependent relationship. You can all have Christmas. Boris Johnson, it would be inhumane to cancel Christmas. 5 days later, I think it was, Christmas is cancelled. So that is a prime example there, isn't it, Mark, of point 6.
Yeah, well, and further back when it was just flatten the curve.
Yes.
And then we will go forward. And then, let's bring in masks, stop the spread. If we just do this, social distance. So all these things are giving you false hope along the way. And then obviously the big one, the vaccine, which A lot of people had a lot of hope in that.
Yep.
And then it comes out that, really don't stop transmission.
Yep.
Don't stop getting it. Again, it's all this, well, you might go back to normal. And where does that leave? It just leaves people hoping. If I read on Facebook how many people said, "Oh, I hope we can, get back to normal soon."
Yeah. Yeah, I've had people say, "Oh, I've had the vaccine, can't wait for normality to return." And I just think they've even openly stated, they've even told you, that the as Rich Allen calls him, Jean-Claude Van Damme, has even said that restrictions are going to have to stay in place. Bill Gates, it's looking like 2022 now by the time the lockdowns can end. It's this constant, here's a carrot, you reach for it, it gets moved back a little bit more. It's just a constant gaslighting. I mean, it really is. That is the term to sum it up. And to round up on point 7, so it was there were 7 points. So dominate and control. At its extreme, the ultimate objective of a pathological gaslighter is to control, dominate, and take advantage of another individual or a group, or, and this is important, it's almost like the person writing this knew, even an entire society, by maintaining and intensifying an incessant stream of lies and coercions. The gaslighter keeps the gaslightees, the public, in a constant state of insecurity, doubt, and fear. And there is a little bit more. I think it just goes down to the next page. The gaslighter can then exploit their victims at will for the augmentation of their power and personal gain. And again, we're seeing that constantly. Every day on the news, we're seeing this. That the lies, the coercions, the manipulation of data that they're using in order to further these lies. Thoughts on that, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the way they've manipulated, obviously to their own ends, a lot of people have profited out of this as well. So a lot of it's been driven in that direction for self-serving.
Yeah.
And but yeah, it is quite. I'm just going back. There's a couple of things which you just want to highlight on. Like you said, the person who wrote this, did he have a mentioning, an entire population, society.
Yeah, and the thing is, this is we could sit here and talk all night about how this document, this blog, really can relate to so many instances throughout history. It's not just COVID, it's not just COVID. The thing is, the reason it's working so well now is because they've had practice. They've done this, as we've said, for centuries and centuries. They've had practice, and that's how they can keep this going, really. I have put a link to this in the comments, guys, so if you want to go and have a read of this and check the source, as I know some of you guys will, have put a link from Psychology Today in the comments section, so do go and have a look and give us your thoughts on that. And please, if anyone's got questions for myself, Mark, or Andrew, throw them in the comments and we'll do our best to answer. Either of you, have you got any points on that before we move on there?
Well, I was going to add in there that you mentioned, Jean-Claude Van Damme or Jonathan Van Damme. Yeah. And I mean, he was one of the guys. Actually, I didn't know he was because I don't really follow the names of all these, pretty horrible Sage members, but I know he was on Sage. And then he was one of these guys that I found a clip of saying, "Oh, I've just been on the phone to this guy in Hong Kong that I know, and we both agree that face masks don't work." I'm paraphrasing what he was saying. He said that, I think, on the 3rd of May, was it, or the 3rd of April? And that was one of these stupid briefings,
Yep.
And then what I came across yesterday or a day before was a very interesting video by the researcher Dave Cullen, the Irish guy, Computing Forever, who's like he did. I first heard of him because he was doing critiques of Doctor Who, actually, and he was a Doctor Who fan. And he's got a really good series on how they were putting all this identity politics in Doctor Who. This was a couple of years ago. But he did a really good video, and he basically was showing you how they actually sold the scamdemic, how they made it. And what he had was initially, and you can, I think I posted this video on my Facebook page, but it's on my, I've posted it on my CV Pandemic Investigation in a post today. But in this video, I think a key one, very important one, is he had a clip from Channel 4 News from 2010, basically saying, "Yeah, well, we now know that the swine flu scam was a pandemic was a scam," and that was Jon Snow basically doing this report. So top of the media tree, so to speak, in the UK. But then Dave Cullen, that's his hors d'oeuvre for the main meal, and then he goes into this presentation, which I still haven't checked the exact thing that this came from, and I'm not sure where he got the video, but it's some presentation, and it says Chatham House in the back. I don't know if that means it was at Chatham House. Yeah. It probably does, and that's, of course, Chatham House rules are used in like common purpose meetings and stuff where you're not allowed to tell anyone. Yeah. But there's this Belgian guy lecturing, and he starts off and he's saying, "Here's my conflict of interest," and he holds this slide up for about 2 seconds and then just goes straight on. Doesn't say conflict of interest, so of course he can freeze frame it and see he worked for all these pharmaceutical companies, and he's now a flu advisor or something. He says, I forget all the exact details. I only watched it yesterday. But then he just basically goes through how, you need to do this in the media. And he says, like, when the swine flu people were dying, what I did was I went to a couple of the funerals just to show that I cared,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then he says that was really to place me in the media, and help get the story out. And he says, you've got about 2 weeks to get the story out. And then after that, you shot it, really, which we kind of knew that anyway. Mm-hmm. So this is how you do it. This is how you sell it. This is, you need to do this. You need to be this visible face. You need to be the only person that the media will go to. You've got to set that up, he says, early on, and get your face in the right place, sort of thing. And he explains how they all do it. And he's making all these jokes, and then all the audience are lapping it up. They're lapping up what he's saying. He's actually saying this is how you sell it to the public. He's not saying, this is a truthful way of doing things. He's telling them how to lie and how to make the lie stick, although he doesn't use that language.
Yeah.
And then in the front row of this presentation, which I think was done in January 2019, I think he says, guess who's sitting in the front row? Jean-Claude Van Damme. He's in the camera. You can see him. And I'm thinking, wow. That's really interesting. So it's a really, to me, it's pretty sort of explosive stuff, really. I don't know where he got this from, but he breaks it all down. It takes about 45 minutes.
Wow. Do you have a link to this? Or?
Yeah, I don't think I can put things in the chat, so I'll put it on the Facebook.
If you you can send it in the private chat if you can't put it in the comment.
Yeah. So it's definitely worth watching, and that Channel 4 news report which I posted on my Facebook. It's only 3 minutes long. That right there basically says, they set up this all up in 2009. By 2010, they knew it was a scam, but then that was never talked about, of course, except on maybe one little broadcast for 3 minutes. Literally, this thing's 3 minutes long on Channel 4. It got 3 minutes on Channel 4, as opposed to like being covered for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, on national poster campaigns. And
the problem is that it would have to be covered on the media broadcasting companies and the tabloid companies, and these are the people that are basically selling this. So that they're never gonna. That would be them saying we've lied to you for a year, and they'd run the risk of losing their viewers then or whatever. So they're never going to do it. And there's always that joke, isn't there? When a newspaper apologises, it's on a little advert or whatever about that big on page like 17 or something. Kind of you think you don't even see it in the newspaper because it's that tiny. I suppose giving a 3-minute segment is the television equivalent of sticking a little apology in the newspaper, really.
Yeah.
Right, okay, so we'll move on. So I did promise that I had a little bit of news, a little bit of a revelation. So, and I know this is the first time that Mark and Andrew have heard this, so I'll be interested in your thoughts. I was contacted today by a friend who happened to be at a party, a gathering the weekend because, sod the rules. So he was at a gathering the weekend, and he happened to be talking to a very, very well-to-do person within the West Midlands, very high up businessman. Obviously, I'm not naming names. And this guy owns several businesses and has hundreds of clients, amongst whom are several MPs. And this guy was telling the gathering on Saturday that it's a well-known factor. It's a well-known thing, really, amongst MPs that when they have their social gatherings, when they have their meetings, when they're in the pub, in Commons, the Commons bar, there are never any masks. There's never any social distancing. They don't do anything that they're telling us to do. So it is a classic do as I say, not as I do. And there are videos to back this up. There was that classic video that I shared the other day of, I think it's in America, where the guy, you can just see him backstage. He thinks he's out of camera shot, and he walks to the side of the stage, puts his mask on, walks to the podium on the stage and takes his mask off, just to give the illusion, that he's always had that mask on until it's time to talk. And apparently this is what's happening. We've had pictures of Matt Hancock where he's clearly not social distancing, even in front of the cameras. Maybe sometimes it becomes so normal for them to not be doing this that they forget that they should be doing it, and they forget when they're in front of the camera. So he basically backed us up there and said, yes, that is what's going on. They're not following any of the rules themselves. He said that the biggest reason for this is a huge amount of vested interests, and that is in the PPE. Now, I mentioned earlier about the masks, and I'd come back to it. Now, apparently, and this guy is very well to do, and I'm talking, millions. And he said that there are certain individuals in Parliament who stand to make not just millions, but billions in vested interests through things like PPE, through things like vaccines, which again we know, but it's always good to get this clarified. Through things like the Nightingale hospitals being built, where did that money go? People keep arguing, well, they're just not using them. Well, yeah, but someone must have won that contract to build these Nightingale hospitals. Who won that contract? Who was it that got the big fat brown envelope to build a bunch of hospitals that were never going to be used? That money went somewhere. And he also claims that that this vested interest is causing a huge chasm within Parliament, because you have the people that don't have vested interests, obviously. And I think these are people like Dennis Swain, who we're seeing talk up more and more, and these backbenchers that are opposing, revolting against Boris Johnson, and the people that do have vested interest. And we know this. He said that Chris Whitty and Patrick Vallance are making an absolute killing. Again, we know this. Patrick Vallance, £600,000 worth of shares in GSK. Chris Whitty, £40 million donation from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Why on earth are we expected to listen to these people giving us advice when they have such vest? If he had £600,000 worth of shares in Mercedes-Benz, it wouldn't really matter. But he has £600,000 worth of shares in a medical company, a vaccine-producing medical company. If you went to BMW to work with £600,000 worth of shares in Mercedes, they'd probably be thinking, what's his game here? What's he up to? Why aren't we asking these questions of these people? Now, he also said that he's been in touch, slightly off topic here, but he's also commonly in touch with an American senator who claims that Donald Trump will not leave the White House. And they're predicting within the Senate that there will be something akin to civil war early next year in America. How true that is, I don't know. But
I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, to that. Anyway, so I don't mean to interrupt, but
no. So I mean, the reason I brought that up is because we've discussed it in previous shows, and I knew that would be of interest to both of you, because we've discussed that on the show, and we've discussed it personally. So yeah, I mean, the person I know who was lucky enough really to be there and hear this conversation said he was just absolutely mind blown, and called me this morning first thing to tell me. Gave me permission to say this, obviously, as long as I kept everyone anonymous. But I mean, it's not really much that we don't already know, but it's great to have it backed up, isn't it? To have, these people that do know what's going on and are in the know. And he my friend said to him, like, well, what are you doing then? Are you following the rules? Clearly not, because he was at a party. But are you scared of this virus? And he just said, no. He said there is a virus, but it's massively, massively overplayed.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've heard similar stories from other high ups, haven't we? Just and just like people like Neil Ferguson, people are saying, he was a naughty boy, he broke lockdown and blah blah blah, and he came up with all this crap model and all of that, and that's all true. But the point that wasn't talked about anywhere in any of the press, nobody made the point that, well, clearly he doesn't think the virus is a threat, which is the most significant point, because he probably knows that it's just bogus. It is a seasonal illness. And that's the bit that the fewest number of people talk about, is that he knows all these people that are like just what your friend said. I'm not bothered about it, and if only everyone had that attitude, the thing won't work. So it's all you've got to keep that fear-driven narrative going, haven't you, to make this all work? Like you've just been going through in that document, and that's really, I think, just thinking about this off the top of my head, if you watch that video. And maybe I've got it up in a window, and I might just try and play a bit of it through the screen.
I've put it into the comments now, guys, so you can go and watch that video.
Right, and it's about 45 minutes. I just sort of clicked on it just to refresh my memory slightly. But really, if you were to go through that document, that is really the techniques, or very similar to what they're using to keep it going. And that video shows you how they set it up. So the two together. It should give you, they should give you an aha. This is how it's done. This is how you do it. We are pretty clued in with how they did it anyway, because, with looking at 9/11 and stuff like that, there's a lot of crossover with how they did that and how they continue to do it. But of course, 9/11, I think, was lasted for a day, and then the effects of it kind of just sort of were only really felt in air travel, really, and in certain other places, like maybe if you go to a big. Up security at big gatherings and things like that.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's impinged onto everything.
It is, and that's the point that this guy was trying to make. That it is this do as I say, not as I do, and that we've seen it leaked where the Commons bar was serving after 10 p.m. and the Commons bar was still open when everywhere else was closed. And it brings me to the next point, which is. Tier 4. I mean, how many are we going to get? It's like the Rambo films. There's just going to be far too many, and they're going to drag it on for far too long. Now, Tier 4. Go on, Andrew. Sorry.
I was just going to say, to quote, I think it was ABC from the 1980s. Tears are not enough. Clearly.
Yeah. I mean, it's ridiculous. Now, I saw someone mention the other day, and it got me thinking. It kind of like a light bulb goes off in your head when you have these moments. I'm sure you both have them. But basically what they've done is they've kept London and they're where they were working and obviously were every day in Tier 2. That meant they could go to the pub as long as they were eating. They could go Christmas shopping. They could go to these, the unessential shops. And they could do what they wanted, essentially. The second it comes to Parliament breaking up for Christmas, and off they disperse to their country homes, and Boris Johnson is apparently down in Cornwall at his holiday home. I think they're in like Tier 1 or something. As soon as they all disperse, lock it down. So now London and the population of those areas are now in Tier 4 under the tightest restrictions. It basically is lockdown. It is, under a different name. While they can flee off to their country homes and live in lesser tiers. I mean, what do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really think like that. Yeah. I mean, it's just taking the piss, basically, isn't it?
It's also created a new narrative. If you watch that interview, Matt Hancock and I can't remember his name, gone out of my head at the moment. That was on. Now that was, to me, it was pure NLP stage managed interview, building a new narrative. Yeah,
and that's what it is. I can't remember what point it was in the document we were looking at earlier, but it's that point where I think it was earlier in the document, but it's that point where we've kind of called them out a bit now, and now they're tripling down. They're doubling down and they're taking it to the next level. And I actually think if we were to go back and look at previous interviews and shows that we've done on this, we even said at some point there will be another level to this. When it all kind of goes a bit quiet and everyone's really just getting on with their life, there will be another level to this, and there'll be the next scare tactic. And I think this is it. This teenage mutant ninja virus that's now kind of mutated supposedly, and yet there's been already thousands of mutations of this virus already. And Andrew, as you've done so well with your freedom of information requests to show that they haven't even isolated the virus, and if they haven't isolated it, then how can they know that there's another strain of it?
And there's lots of add-on to that actually, and because I wrote to my MP and she actually replied, and I thought she stopped replying to me actually. Well, I haven't written to that many times, about 3 times I think, and so I pointed this out about the virus not being isolated, and then she sent me back, no, so it has been isolated. It was isolated by a team of Canadian researchers, and that I think was basically all she said. And I thought, really? So I went off and checked that story out, and then I remembered I'd come across it before. And so basically, I went and checked this out, and I found the same story about these 3 researchers working in Canada. It was the same photograph of these 3 researchers with a story saying, "Oh, it was done this, that, and that." But it was very glib. There were very few details. I think it was the 11th of March or something. This day, so it was quite early on in the scam, and then I found out because I thought I've seen this somewhere before. And then what it was the lady who's called Christine Massey, who did one of the early FOIAs in Canada, and I copied her text basically from my FOIA and sent it to Public Health England. This was on her website, and she dug into this story, and she had a whole page on it showing that these researchers didn't actually isolate the virus. They did do something with some like monkey tissue or something related to SARS-CoV-2, but they didn't actually isolate the virus, even though that was the claim. The real truth of it was they didn't isolate it, because they'd used a PCR test as part of the testing, so you get into this sort of cyclic thing, and so I've just been in the process of writing back to my MP because I had to double check something she was saying, and pointing out to her that, well, okay, so let's just go along with this idea that they did isolate the virus. The Canadian team did, but they didn't actually. Why didn't the UK want to independently verify that? I mean, it's all very well, like, for example, I talk to people, this was changing the subject slightly, but it's relevant. I say to people, well, cold fusion's real, experiments were done. And then somebody said, no, it's not real. It was all a scam because nobody ever reproduced it, So they immediately asked for reproduction of cold fusion, which was reproduced, actually, if you go and look at the work of John Bockris and stuff, who reproduced Pons and Fleischmann's work. So that not only is that non-reproduction claim untrue, but that's what they immediately asked for. But when it comes to this, they're not worried about it being reproduced. They're not worried about Britain doing its own reproduction of this, a virus isolation, to prove that it's a real thing. That doesn't matter anymore. And that clearly must be to do with this abusive, codependent relationship, which is somehow formed pretty early on in the scheme of things. Perhaps, as this bloody guy was saying, within the first 2 weeks. Yeah. Once you get that story out and repeat it enough in the first 2 weeks, you've cracked it. You can do what you can tell them that the sky should be pink, and they'll believe you,
Yeah, I know people that would believe that. I mean, I just want to make another point, and then Mark, we'll come to that wheel that you've got. I'm keen on that. But I was talking to a guy, a neighbour, and I have just moved house, so I have to be careful with how I talk to my neighbours, so I don't scare them. And it so happens that we both deal a lot with the NHS. And he's not a doctor or anything like that. He provides like an outside service to the NHS, and his hospital is in Coventry. And I just to kind of get his reaction, I just asked him, what's your feelings on this? Are you seeing any effects in the hospitals? And he said, oh yes. He said this time round it's a lot worse. And I said, well, it is winter. And he said, yes. He said, we've got 100 patients currently in the hospital that are positive. And I said, all right. I said, that's quite a lot, And I said, and out of those 100, how many are in the ICU? And he said, 15. And I said, okay, so 15%. It just happened to work out like that because my maths is rubbish. I said, right, so 15%. I said, and how many of those 15 are going to die? He said, well, the stats seem to show that it probably will be about 2. And I was like, okay, so 2 might die. Okay, fine. I said, and out of the other 85, or even out of those 100, how many of them went to hospital because they had COVID? So they're sat at home, they've got the effects, they feel like absolute shit, they're going to go to the hospital. And when they get there, yes, you've got COVID, into a bed you get. Or how many of them went in for a routine hip operation or went in for whatever and got tested and they're positive. They're lying there feeling absolutely fine, they feel great, but they've just happened to be tested positive. Now they form one of the statistics. And he said, I don't know. I said, but that's an interesting thought, isn't it, mate? Because that's the difference. There's a big difference there between, out of those 100, how many have gone in because of it, and how many have gone in routinely tested and they just happen to go onto a statistic? Because you telling me 100 positive patients, it's quite a scary prospect around all the hospitals. If you added that up, that's quite scary. And of course, that's what we get told by the media. But what you're not telling us is, or what you don't know, is how many just got it from a routine test, they feel fine, they've had the hip operation, and they're ready to go home tomorrow. You're not telling us that. And that's the big difference when it, as you say, Andrew, when it comes to selling it, because that's how you sell it. If there's 2 people in a hospital and all of a sudden there are 4 people, it's 100% increase. Cases double. And that kind of headline, instead of just saying, oh, there's 4, people go, was that it 4? But if they say cases double, like the Blackpool, the now famous Blackpool hospital that said that their ICU beds were full of COVID patients. They had 8 beds that were full of COVID patients. But just to say that their ward was full, people go, oh God, Blackpool's overflowing with COVID patients, but it was just 8. So
one of the things that Dave Cullen makes is that up until this year, really, the sort of death figures that are announced have never really been talked about. So people have no clue that, for example, 1,300 and odd people, in fact, 1,600 people die in Britain every day. In England, I think that is actually.
Yep.
Just of anything.
Yep.
So when you say, 50 people have died today, of COVID,
yep.
and that could just be, in a big city or in the south of England or something like that. It could just be normal deaths.
Yep.
And we know that this test doesn't work. I mean, there was this case, I don't know if you heard about it, there was a case in Portugal with some holidaymakers, and they were tested for COVID, and then they were quarantined for 14 days. And there was a German family, apparently, or a German couple, I forget the exact details, and they took the Portuguese health authority to court and said, prove that this test is reliable, and they won the case. They won the case. And the PCR test was said to be not reliable enough to dictate that what was done to them should have been done. And of course, there's been people saying this for a while, but it's now sort of some of that's gaining a bit of momentum, of course, far too late, because going back to getting the narrative going and all the testing, we had the virus narrative going out for 2 weeks, then we had the testing narrative going out, but after that for 2 weeks, and on and on and on.
It's the point where logic no longer applies, does it, Andrew? Because they've had that 2 weeks of battering you, as the document we spoke about earlier reveals, repetition. And then people are so inanely scared shitless that, as you say, they could tell you that the sky is pink. They could tell you that, if you don't crawl around on your hands and knees for 3 hours every morning, you could catch the virus. And people would do it.
Yeah. And so... it's just, what's the exit strategy? When people wear these masks, they say, well, how long is that going to go on for then? Why would you do it if you don't know what it's going to take to stop it happening? Why? If you get in a car and drive somewhere, you don't just keep driving around until
no, you have a destination.
Drive around, you've got to have a destination. You've got to have an end point somewhere.
Yeah,
and it's like. Right. People, I don't think anybody's been asking that. When am I going to take this mask off? And even with this vaccine, I might have said this earlier, but I think it's worth repeating. Yeah. Even with this vaccine, they're not. I mean, you think, I'll get the vaccine, rip my mask off, hooray! No, that they're saying, well, this vaccine actually might not work.
And they're still queuing up. They're still queuing up to get it.
They haven't. You can't get a certificate yet. You're not going to be allowed to take your mask off. It's making some people sick. So even going along with all the government stories, why would you want to do it?
Absolutely right.
And I put in a post today, I think we're looking at a lot of symbology here. And I don't know whether you said this earlier in the thing. A lot of these events, and then Richard made this point in the programs we did, and it's something I hadn't really picked up on, to be honest. They've happened around the equinoxes.
Yes. Yeah.
The solstices. They've done.
We had the Halloween. We had the Halloween one where they filled us with fear again. I mean, we talk about symbolism. We spoke about this before, both of us, Mark and Andrew. For me, I was saying to my wife yesterday, you can't get any more satanic than cancelling the birthday of Jesus. Now, I'm not religious, and I don't buy into that rubbish. Apologies to anyone that does, but you can't get any more satanic than cancelling Christmas, in my opinion. That's one of the biggest things they've done. And as Alex has pointed out in the comment section, today we enter the age of Aquarius. And I do think you're right, Andrew. I think there's something massively going on a symbolic stage.
I sort of wonder, from looking at sort of higher level of things and getting away from some of the political shenanigans, you can almost see our reality being broken down by piece, and the things that we took to be real are becoming unreal. And I say it's like I'm walking around in a zombie apocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a film. I have to say film, not movie, because I'm British.
Well, we've
don't really. But
we've shifted consciousness. In my opinion, we've shifted consciousness, and we're it's almost the Mandela effect, which is a different show in itself. Would like to do a show on that actually, but it's almost like the Mandela effect, and we're now living amongst zombies, as you put it. People in masks. I mean, right. So we've got about 10 minutes left. Mark, bring out your wheel. I'm dead keen to see this diagram that you've got that links to the document.
Well, many years ago, they made this document to do with domestic abuse, and it was done through an intervention. There was a project about intervention to do with domestic abuse called the Duluth wheel. If you look that up online, you'll find that.
I'll see if I can get it.
I said to you earlier, didn't I think, which was about, primarily it was to do with men and a woman relationship, and predominantly men doing the abuse. Obviously, that's changed as things have moved along. So it's no longer regarded as a gender thing. It's human to human, so to speak. But there's some interesting things. It's called the power and control wheel. Okay, now in there it's to do with like domestic abuse. So in there there's some things that really correlate with what we said about the relationship between the government and the people. And one of them is on here. You'll see it's called using isolation, controlling what you do. So they're controlling what we do. Limiting your outside activities. This is all mentioned in the wheel.
I've got it up now, Mark. I'm just getting up the wheel for you.
Okay.
There we go. Look at that.
Yeah, I've got a little bit more text in mind in the actual.
Okay, yeah. You explain them for us. Absolutely.
If you go to isolation, which is what I just use in isolation. So accounting for your whereabouts. So I think we're all, track, trace, all that. Then another correlation in that wheel is using coercion and threats. So that's another. So economic abuse. I think we're all familiar with what's going on economically.
Yeah.
Preventing you from getting a job. So as we know, jobs are just
scarce. Yeah.
They're going. Making you ask for money. Interfering with work or education. So that's another area. Credit cards, permission. So it's all, you can see where that's going. And one of the other ones is using children. Now, what are we moving into at the moment? Or we've been because they said it doesn't affect children.
Yes, yeah.
Now they're using children with the testing and all that. And
yeah, of course, children, of course, just elicit such strong emotions in people, of course, and it kind of makes people take that guilt trip. You see charity adverts on TV; it's always children. To go back to the economic abuse, I'd like to bring up the potential universal credit that keeps being bandied around. The whole, reliant on the state for our money that they're talking about at the moment.
Yeah. I mean that's completely in there, isn't it? On an economic level, you're having to, again, it's codependent. You're having to ask for this money.
Yep.
So that's setting up codependence. But does anybody remember the nanny state when that used to be put around?
Yes, the nanny state. Yeah. The term. Yeah.
So if you went into, if you looked at a psychology model called transactional analysis, that's transactions in relationships between two people or many people.
So the nanny state has now changed into the evil stepmother state, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So if you look at it, what they call transactional analysis, they have where you have a parent, adult, child, ego states, and that can alter between how you talk to somebody, actually. So the government come across, and nanny state's a good example, which was set up a long time ago. So they come across as the parent, and you come across as the child. Because how many times have you, I don't listen to the radio very often, but I turned it on this morning, and I could hear people asking about what they could do, as if they were children.
Yeah, absolutely right.
And asking this government advisor on a radio show, am I allowed to do this? Can I do this? So autonomy, or your autonomy, like I said, to be self-governing, trusting in your decision-making, your own judgments has completely been taken away from people. And I think that's very, very taps into what they call, like I said, transactional analysis. No longer the adult ego state is present.
Yeah.
Because they've taken that rational, that rational thinking part of the brain away in your adult ego state. So, and it's about keeping you in that child. And the parent.
I mean, the other expression that we've used, I think, Mark, in to do with 9/11 specifically, is trauma-based mind control.
Yeah.
And I think that's always a very powerful, sort of succinct way of, this is what that is. This of course, the wheel breaks it down into all the different ways in which that's constructed, the trauma-based mind control, and what is actually, the components of that are and stuff, or what they can be, maybe in there's different ways in there and doing it. But it's interesting how, we can see terrorism and the threat of that as being one type of, forming an abusive relationship, but this just goes so much beyond that,
The thing is with this, Andrew, is it affects everybody.
Yeah,
that's the problem. Terrorism, there's that whole statistic where you stand more chance of being struck by lightning than being killed in a terrorist attack or whatever.
And I mean, that's why they had to pull this scam to something like this, because, that I think was just a precursor. And I mean, all now that obviously hindsight is very clear in, but we can see all the steps to this being constructed. You plug 9/11 into the swine flu scam, kind of, from 2001 and 2009, and you sort of get pretty close to this, Yeah,
that's right. It's the thing is, I've said before, I've seen people, my own dad for starters, who never really looked into conspiracies or used to laugh at my kind of thoughts and beliefs. And because it meant he couldn't go up the Albion anymore, or he couldn't go to the pub or whatever, it was directly affecting him. Yeah. He kind of woke up a little bit and started to take notice. So there is that. I guess that's a good side to this, that people are trying to question that haven't before.
The other thing, which of course they're plugging into this, and I can't remember if we talked about this previously, but it's worth mentioning again, is the climate change scam. They've plugged them together now. And the World Economic Forum have been saying, I think there's a little interesting thing which I didn't think of when I first heard of this, because you might have seen that video with Prince Charles saying, we're going to do I forget the exact words he uses, but it's talking about, we need to, look at climate change. But what he actually says is, he says, we have a very narrow window. We have a very narrow window. And I think a couple of them say that. And he says that, I think, even on the World Economic Forum, we've got 6 months.
Yeah.
Why is this window so narrow? Why are they saying that?
Maybe because that's as long as it takes before we actually just start kicking up a storm and
something like that, And so that I didn't really pick up on that first. Why they would even say that?
No.
And maybe put this 6 months figure together, because putting that in, they don't have to put that in, do they?
No.
They could just say, we've. This needs to be done and looked at soon. But this narrow window thing has come up as an expression, and So does that mean that there is going to be something which they are trying to get through, and they know that they've got a deadline which is nothing to do, well, not necessarily to do with our the time it takes us to programmers or whatever, but there's maybe some external factor which we don't know about,
Possibly,
that they're working towards, so who knows?
Yeah. Mark, we've got a minute left or so. We can run over a little bit. It's not a problem. Is there anything else you want to kind of point towards this? Because this is fascinating for me.
I've just felt, I would really like to encourage people, and I'm not preaching or anything like that. I think I'm trying to look at a way how we can bring people to bring their front brain online again, the thinking part of the brain, and have rational thinking and have autonomy again to really think for themselves. And I think that's a big factor that, because I have been on Facebook, I've been, pumping a lot of stuff out, and I just feel like Andrew's mentioned a lot, about you're in an echo chamber and it gets tiring, and you can't preach to the converted, and not that I'm trying to preach. So for me, I'm just on a psychology level, say it's about trying to get that, because when you're in fear, that thinking part of the brain goes offline.
Yeah.
How can we bring that back online?
I'll tell you one little thing which I think can be helpful, a very minor thing, and it's obvious to some people who've done it, but I've noticed that I get like a tension in my stomach, which I don't realise is there. Yeah. And I'm not really like ratty or anything like that. I'm just tensed up, and I just find that if you just sort of let it go and sort of breathe a bit more deeply, you don't have to meditate or anything like that. Just breathe a bit more deeply, and this ties in with something that I came across from Wilhelm Reich, who of course was into psychology and all kinds of stuff. And he talked about people having an emotional plague. He called it an emotional plague. And this again is what this is. We're in an emotional plague now, full on. Yeah. And that diagram is relates to all of that. And he said in this, he was talking to his son at the time, Peter Reich, and he was saying, people hate me, for saying that things don't have to be like this, and they don't. We don't have to hate. He says we don't have to hate. We don't have to hate, and people hate me for saying that. Yeah. And he talked about their bellies going tight, and he actually used that in an expression to his son. And if you've got this tightness in your belly, that is a symbol, not a symbol, a sign of you being tense, and that you're not, And I'm just the same, and I just think, if I just breathe a bit, it really makes me feel better. It's the simplest thing. You just take a breath, you stop, and you just think, I'm just gonna, just let it go a bit, and then you can feel that I think that helps to, like you say, Mark, to sort of activate your brain and just take a step back, breathe a little bit, have a breath, let that tension go. Flop your arms down, whatever it is.
That becomes harder, Andrew, though, as Mark said, when you're bombarded with 24-hour news.
Yeah.
You watch the BBC, you turn the news off because you're going out. You drive into work, you get in the car, you stick on LBC or talk radio or whatever. You're being bombarded with more, and when they're not bombarding you, the adverts are bombarding you.
That's right.
You get home, you stick the telly back on. So when do people actually get time to just sit down, relax, switch it all off? People don't.
That's right. You've got to make an effort to distance yourself from all the mainstream output. Watch your bloody non-advert bloody, DVDs, and maybe, I don't know what, Netflix. I don't think that has ads. Not that I don't have Netflix.
No, but, not yet.
But just speaking personally, a very minor thing. I've got about 7,000 songs on my phone. That I've collected. It's my entire music collection. Just have it all on my phone. I can just play all of that. There's no interruptions then.
Yeah.
So if you've got the facility to do that, or maybe Spotify, I think you do get commercials in that. But anything that's non-commercial, non-news, try that.
Yeah.
One of the other things which can help people, anybody watching, is try not to look back at the past too much and not too much into the future. Try and be in the here and now. And there's ways to do that using similar to what Andrew's saying, grounding techniques. What a great one you can do on a train or anywhere really is called the 5 senses. And and I can post a document on that. It just runs you through 5 senses, you know, 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's a really positive way to end the show, because I mean, it's when we talk about this, we talk obviously off air, and we are all 3 very quite down men really at times when we think about this, and obviously talking about it for an hour. I've got a bottle of wine waiting for me for when I come off this call, because it does get you down, and you have to find ways to do it, and that is perfect. I mean, the past has gone, you can't change it, the future ain't happened yet, and it's just the now. And of course, speaking for myself, I've got my young son, and Christmas is coming up, and I'm trying to get all excited for him and stuff like that. And it's just living in the now, and everyone has that. Everyone has their special moments and their friends, which of course they're trying to take away from you by stopping you from seeing your family, and stop getting depressed. But that's what they're doing, and we have to fight back in our own ways. Little wins, really, little wins, and I think that's the best. So just a quick, obviously, as always, the last word from the both of you. So Andrew, have you got just the last word? Obviously, last show of the year.
Yeah, I just say, we'll keep going, and I think it's very important, as you say, to try and take pleasure in the little things of life, maybe some of the bigger things you've been deprived of. So, I just go out for a short walk, and I might just sort of look at the way the sunlight is falling on the ground. I think, oh, that's an interesting shadow or something like that. I'd never noticed that before. Or, you walk past something that's actually quite interesting to look at, quite beautiful, and you've got to try and appreciate those sorts of things. Yeah,
that's great. And Mark?
I'd just say, as much as possible, try and be in the here and now. Try not to look forward, as I said before, because that creates uncertainty, which we don't know too far in front. So when you're in the now, it just grounds you a little bit and keeps you, like Andrew said, on your walks, connect with nature. Whatever you do that you get joy from, because there's a war on joy at the moment.
Yeah, that's right. And I think for everyone watching, if you can just take that advice really and take it in, hopefully it makes Christmas a little bit better. And so that was the last one of the year, guys. When we come back, I did just give myself an idea. We will do a show on the Mandela effect. Why not? It's a fascinating subject, that is. But yeah, so have a great Christmas and as happy a new year as you can. Spend it with your family, your friends. Go out and see people, get people around, have a party, have a drink, eat plenty of food, and have an all-round good time. And sod the government, sod what they're saying, telling us. Let's just have a good time, guys. So thank you, Andrew, for being a show regular for the year. Really appreciate it. Mark, thank you for coming on, as and when you do. Insights are always appreciated. And thank you to the guys that have watched this and made it a rather successful show, really, since its inception. So thanks to everyone. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we'll see you in 2021. Bye.